It's all about weight training and training transfer in this video. I talked to some of the world's top coaches, including Goran Obradovic, coach to Ivana Vuleta, Jeremy Fischer, who's coached multiple Olympic jumps medalists, Aaron Gadson, coach to Thea Lafond, triple jumper, and perhaps one of the most knowledgeable coaches of all, Dan Pfaff. My last video on weight training's transfer to jumping performance created quite a lot of a stir, shall we say. Now, I want to make it clear that in that video I presented information from the Soviet era that indicated that there were limitations with specific exercises, including the snatch, to jumps performance. Many of you picked up on that. And I want to state that weight training does have a role, as I said in the video, to jumps performance. But let's listen to some of the world's top coaches and have their views and opinions heard. Let's start off with Dan Pfaff, and you're going to hear what he said whilst presenting at a Jumps and Hurdles Symposium in Sweden a year or so back.
Let's use strength. Strength is an adjunct. It's a supportive measure. It's not necessarily a driver. In some systems, it's more of a driver than others. But my question always when programming strength, or looking at programs of strength, is what are we trying to strengthen and how do we do it best? And how strong is strong enough? There's a tipping point. You get stronger, you're going to affect other things. You're biasing the system. How's this strength affecting system inputs and reactions? What's happening to the hormonal system? What's happening to the endocrine system? What's going on with your fluid dynamics and movement expression? How is this? Is it improving movement expression? Is it inhibiting? Is it changing it outside our bandwidth? So some of the items we write in training are what we call contextual. So they may not have transference. So in training, I look at it as a generational scheme. So I'll use the pole vault for an example. So for me, first generational work in programming for a pole vaulter is doing competition length jumps. So the max number of steps that they would use with the highest grip and the strongest flex pole, that would be first generational work. But we know we can't do that every day or a lot because it's very demanding. So we do second generational work to support it. We do short run jumps, maybe 10 steps or 12 steps instead of 18 or 20. And to support our second generation, then we'll do workouts that involve acceleration and speed and different pole vaulting exercises. So the third generation supports the second supports the first. You kind of see the generational pattern. Fourth generation work would be things that support the third generation. So that would be weight training and plyometrics and throwing for power conversion indices, perhaps gymnastics, alactic runs, so that we build more running capacity to do more short run jumps. So in a programming hierarchy, my number one KPI is jumping well in a competition. My second priority is doing short run jumps and related exercises in those short run jumps to support the first generation. And my third generation are activities that influence those first two generations. And the fourth are things that support that. Now, this is my bias. This is how I train sprinters, jumpers, decathletes, and heptathletes with this kind of mindset.
Next up, we've got Jeremy Fischer, coach to Brittany Reese in the past, for example, and Will Claye.
So, John, thanks for asking me the question about weights and how I feel about the transfer for jumpers. So, I feel my thing is like I'm kind of on a continuum. So, for the younger, the athlete, weights are less important. We still do them, but I think form and function are the most important things. As the athletes get older, weights become more important. And then we get into the specificity of weights and that correlation of the weights and how they transfer into the event that they're doing. So I believe that it differs for different athletes of different ages. Of course, at a younger athlete, when they're developing, form and function are more than tonnage. And then after, as we get later on and we move into elite athletes, definitely specificity is the most important thing.
Incidentally, Jeremy's just set up MVA Services, which is all about helping you to become a better athlete. So go over to his Instagram page and check out MVA Services and you'll find out all you need to know. Okay, let's head over to Serbia and to Goran and hear what he has to say. Strength training is important. With the development of strength, speed and explosive power are improved as well, and both are motor skills fundamental for the event. In addition, and this is very important consideration, weight training works as a prevention from possible injuries. Okay, let's go back to America, see what Gadson has to say about strength training for jumpers. Lifting for jumpers, for me, is primarily about building resiliency, tendon thickness and stiffness, such that jumpers have the necessary capacity to withstand the reps required to learn the skill of jumping as well as withstand the rigours of competition. Lifting will also help with fibre recruitment, range of movement and body composition, and muscle growth if necessary. Aaron also says isometrics will also help with stiffness as well as within a joint angle bandwidth. And he also indicates that plyometrics are great for dynamic stiffness. Now I want to go to some of the comments that were raised on my YouTube channel in response to the video, and they represent a cross-section of positioning as to where weight training lies within coaches and athletes thinking. Spence76 says that he's been training with some European championships and Olympic medalists, high jumpers in the main, and he indicates that they are very strong, can lift a lot of weights. But then he also notes that he's trained with another European championship medalist who's not able to lift as much weight as the other two. So we have a variation there in terms of application, yet all three athletes have achieved at the highest level. Jimmy Scuts 8082 says that he agrees with the majority of what was posted in the particular video, but adds that he likes to use weighted sleds and also hex bar deadlifts. Well, that's getting more specific, isn't it? Towing a sled, we could say, is a form of dynamic weight training, but to me and to many others, it's going to have a more direct transfer into event performance acceleration compared to the squat, which, if you go back to what Dan Pfaff said, with weight training is a fourth generational type of activity. Noah Swoosh 7575 says that he's skeptical that it does contribute to performance. Now, the video, and as you can hear from the coach's comments in this particular video, indicate that weight training does play a role. But there seems to be quite a lot of convergence that, as I've just said, it could be a fourth generational activity or an activity that's removed at least from the top tier of transfer. Now, he also indicates that some athletes respond more to weight training than others, and that's something that I have brought up in other videos and indeed on posts on Instagram in response to the video. One size does not fit all. So it's very difficult to get across in a video what a particular aspect of training will do to the jumping community. Different jumpers will respond differently to any training activity. I'll give another example whilst we're on the subject. A highly elastic jumper who jumps using their tendons a lot, lightweight usually, ectomorphic, slim builds, are likely not going to respond to weight training in the same way that a more mesomorphic, heavier set jumper would. So we have to look at our athlete, we have to provide them with the right training that we think their bodies will respond to, their physiology will respond to. And there's also a psychological aspect in there. Some athletes don't like to do weight training for whatever reason, whilst others do. So we may need to pander to whims to some extent in order to convince the athlete to create the right mindset that they are going to respond from the inclusion of weight training or the non-inclusion of weight training. There's a lot more to it. The individual responses to weight training is something that Stephen Hager also brought up in his response to the video. He looked at various sprinters and used them as examples, saying athletes such as Usain Bolt were particularly well muscled, and therefore he suggested or asked me whether they would be better athletes if they weren't so well muscled. Well, That's a very interesting question. It's not all about muscle size, it's about the rate of force development of a muscle. Some people will put on more muscle compared to others, but within that concept, you've got to realise that more muscle equates to more weight that needs to be shifted down the track or lifted off the board with the long jump takeoff, for example. Therefore, we've got to look closely at power to weight ratio. Now, this was not quite the follow-up video that I wanted to make on the transference of weights into jumping and sprint performance, as I wanted to look at the work of, for example, Franz Bosch and other contemporary thought-provokers and analysts, researchers on weight training's transference. However, I hope the content in this particular video gives you a greater understanding of weight training's transference through the voices of elite coaches and through my responses to some of the comments that you guys posted on the channel.